Reflections with theologian Father James Bacik, lecturer and campus minister at the University of Toledo.
There's also something else that goes on besides the learning in the classroom and trying to get critical skills in place for students. And it can be seen under this heading of transitions, passageways, passovers in life.
Today on Reflections, Father Bacik talks with Mary Riemann, who is a recent graduate from the University of Toledo. The topic of this week's Reflections is the college experience, living through transition. And now, here is Father Bacik.
Well, Mary, since you're a recent graduate of college, I would like to talk with you a little bit about what I'm calling transitions in the collegiate experience, the times of passage from one form of living to another. So I'd like to use that as a framework for getting you to talk a little bit about some of your experiences. And you've been very involved in our university parish and very involved in our Newman Club and so on. And it's been a real pleasure for me to see you grow and develop over the years and to take hold and become your own person. And I often think that the collegiate years are supposed to be that. I mean, it's a wonderful opportunity to get your head together, to establish your identity, to figure out who you are and what you want to do in life, to test out your skills, to try to develop socially and to mature in so many different ways. I mean, it really is. I mean, colleges and universities are supposed to be academic communities. We know that, and we're supposed to learn something. And I'm certainly big on the idea of learning the fundamentals and of having, strict discipline and study habits and all of that. And that's why we've set up these institutions. But there's also something else that goes on besides the learning in the classroom and trying to get critical skills in place for students. And it can be seen under this heading of transitions, passageways, passovers in life. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about that. It strikes me that the very first passageway is from when you leave high school and come to college. And I wondered if you wanted to talk just a little bit about that and how you went through all of that.
I know in my own experience that when I first decided to come to college, it was very exciting. And as the time got closer and closer, the excitement kind of turned to fear. But in knowing that I was going to be living in the dorms with other students who were doing the same thing was somewhat of a pacifier. But it took me, I would say, my whole first 10 weeks to really feel comfortable with it and feel a part of these other people. So in that sense, there was a lot of trying to organize my thoughts, trying to prioritize, why was I at school? Was I at school to meet these people, or am I at school to go to class, or am I at school just, to move away? Or I think a lot of those are questions that freshmen face.
Those are good categories that you gave us there to think about that freshmen would probably have to wrestle with. Are you there primarily to go to class or to socialize, meet people, or to gain your independence? I would guess that sort of all of those things end up happening in one way or another. But and you also talk about the prioritizing, and I think that becomes crucial because a lot of times students it seems to me, are placed in a situation of greater freedom and have to start thinking about those things. Back home, a lot of that was taken care of in a way. I mean, the high school routine became pretty settled, and there were certain priorities set up by simply living in the family and so on. And now in the college scene and on the campus, there's immense new freedom that you have, and you have to start thinking about what you treasure, value, what comes first, how you use your time, and so on. Was that a conscious kind of thing with you? Is that something you're saying looking back after 4 years, or do you remember thinking that as you went along?
It's definitely something I see now looking back. I struggled with it. I probably still, did for the whole 4 years, but looking back, I can see that those were my concerns, and it took me a long time to figure out how to shuffle them and make them work for me.
Yes. In a sense, that's a great preparation for life in the world as a whole. I mean, that's a constant struggle, just figuring out what our priorities are, how we're going to use our time. It's always limited, and it's always more calls on our time, more drains on our energy than we like to think about. And You have to find your own strategies to work it out. And I often think that the collegiate life is greatly pressured in many ways. I mean, especially on our quarter system. I somehow feel that just intensifies everything. There's never a time when there's no pressure. You just get there, get started, and then there you have midterms, and then before long you're looking at finals, and the papers are due in a hurry, and it seems like a constant whirl and a great deal of pressure.
Right.
You experience it that way? Of course, you only know quarters, right? You
Right.
never went to a university or college in which you would have done it through semesters. Mary, before we leave this beginning phase here, I wanted to go back a little bit, even about the phase of picking schools, because that's part of what goes on as well. You want to tell me a little bit about how you went about that, or?
Well, when I was in high school, I didn't really think I was going to go to college. And a lot of factors contributed to that, and of course money was one of them. But I was urged by some of my teachers in high school and some family members to pursue it. And so I started looking around the state of Ohio, of course, because it's in-state and tuition is much less or more inexpensive. And so when I was looking at schools, I first really wanted something small. I came from a small private high school, and I was comfortable with it. But most of our small schools are private schools, and tuition is incredible. So I started to look at state schools, and I visited a number of them, and I really kind of went on a feeling kind of thing. When I was on a campus, I think you can see a community. If there's not a big community, usually I guess I noticed there was one person, a lot of people would be walking by themselves, or there would be not so much interaction among students across campus. Where when I came to the University of Toledo, my experience was different, even on the day that I just visited. I mean, I would walk through the mall, the main part of campus, and there'd be, people in numbers, 3 or 4 people walking, 3 or 4 people sitting on the grass, somebody always yelling over, to say hello to somebody else. And it was just, I could feel it, I guess, an uplifted kind of environment. Mm-hmm. And that was really what I was looking for, somewhere that I knew that there was going to be community and kind of a lightness about it.
I know the religious aspect was important to you too, wasn't it? I mean,
right.
You needed some Catholic presence. Was that a Catholic school you went to, the high school?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, and then I know you were looking for a Catholic presence on the campus and
right.
some way to continue on your faith development, and that was an important part for you also.
That was very important. In fact, when I was looking at campuses, I did ask if they had a parish on campus, or was Mass available on campus, or did they have a Newman Club or something for some sort of Catholic presence that I could relate to.
Mm-hmm. It's and I think that proved to be a good thing for you, didn't it? Your involvement in the university parish and the Newman Club and so on.
Yeah, it sure did.
So I like the way you phrase that about the intuition. I think we often make our decisions like that. There's a feeling tone to decisions that come before rational analysis. I think a lot of times our good decisions are made when we are sort of integrated and together and maybe even prayerful, and when something, an option, seems fitting.
Right.
It just fits. It goes together. It feels right. And evidently that's what happened when you came to this campus. And I think that maybe many students are like that. Their real choices are made not out of clear, rational things about what's in the curriculum and other factors about the school, although I think that factors in for many people. But I think the feeling element is there, the intuitional side of it. And a lot of times maybe you learn to trust your intuitions that way and find out, I was on target with it. So that's an initial transition. Any other aspects of that, like classes? Were they much harder than high school classes, or bewildering, or how did that work out?
Well, since I had gone to a pretty small school in high school, my classes, some of them were just huge, and there was very little individual relationship between teacher and student. But I think that can work to a benefit for a student, but I think it's a hard adjustment. At least for me, it was a hard adjustment. Mm-hmm. To be in a class with 100 to 200 students just listening to a lecture and not really having an opportunity for discussion or anything like that was really an eye-opening experience to me. And to learn how to function and study for such a class was not easy either.
I suspect that that's a big transition for many students coming from high schools. Of course, when you've been there 4 years in high school, most people know your name, and
Right.
there's a personal relationship with a number of students, and so with a number of teachers, and that certainly would be different. Certain programs we run at the university, we try to overcome that. We have what we call our faculty-student dialogue, where we try to put one faculty member together with one student and try to open up an opportunity to get to know faculty members outside of the classroom setting so that they can interact one-to-one and maybe become friendly, or at least the faculty could become a role model or advisor for the students. And that's certainly needed. And you hear that all over the country at large institutions, that students can feel like a cog in a giant wheel, and
Right.
it's hard to take. It's part of the bureaucratic structure we live in the United States, and you have to figure out what to do and how to maintain, I think, your own identity. I noticed you said, you had to work that out and figure out even how you study or how you
Right.
relate in that new situation. Well, Mary, I was thinking of another kind of transition that I think occurs for many students these days, and that is moving from one major to another, or from one college to another. That certainly is common these days. I know many students coming in are worried, well, they don't know what they're going to take, and they're not sure of what their major is, or what their dominant interests are, or what they're good at, and so on. And certainly in my experience as a campus minister, I've seen many people change over the years, and without any terrible bad effects. It all happens. Sometimes people take an extra year, but it doesn't seem to be the end of the world, and they move along nicely through it, and so on. You want to talk a little bit about this idea of changing your mind about majors, careers, and so on?
Well, for me, I guess when I first came to college, I was undecided. So I started out in an undecided major, which had benefits and disadvantages, in the sense that it was hard to get classes because you weren't in a strict program, so your advisor had difficulty scheduling you into classes and things like that.
That's your official category, though. It's
Right.
undeclared major.
Right. And when I did decide on a major, I decided on, the first time, on international relations, which is under the political science department. And I thought that that was really what I wanted to do. However, when I got into the program and experienced a lot of classes, and it just didn't feel right. Again, it was kind of a feeling kind of thing. I enjoyed my classes to a certain extent, but I didn't feel like it was preparing me for anything I really wanted to do when I was going to get out.
Did accord, though, with the great interest you've had in social justice over the years.
Right.
I've noticed that about you. You do have a sort of global perspective and are interested in large problems, or in the justice questions in the world, and questions of poverty and so on. So it probably did touch something
Right.
in you.
In fact, that's why I went that route, because that's what I was interested in, and as far as I knew at that point, that was the best way to go about pursuing something in that field. I don't know really what happened at that time, except that I wasn't comfortable after a year of being in that program, and I decided to try pre-med, which I don't know why I did that either. I think it was just a part of time in my life where I was really trying to look and search for something. And pre-med is so narrow. It gave me a goal. I could be a doctor. I knew exactly what I'd be doing, and I felt that was really what I was looking for. I was looking for some direction, and that gave me distinct direction, so that I could prepare, plan for my life.
That's a very strict regimen and a
Right.
clear path.
Right.
A lot of sciences and
Right.
difficult courses.
Right. So, needless to say, that didn't last very long, but I knew. I think I knew when I went into it that something wasn't right, but it gave me direction, so I went that route.
Well, let's just stay with that for a minute, because I think that part of the collegiate experience is this question of having direction, and that a lot of the problems are along that line of saying that, I feel like I'm drifting, and
Right.
I don't know what I'm going to do. And I find a lot of students sort of get panicky about that and say, I just can't go like this. It's too open-ended. That, I would say, is one of the societal problems today generally. for generally affluent people. I'm not talking about the underclass in the country who, often don't have any options. They don't know how to get out of the poverty situation or out of the enclaves where they live. And they don't have, their problem is not a lot of options, but too few, figuring out what to do. But people at the university and often have that feeling, well, they can do anything. I mean, there's really a whole bunch of options open, and that very freedom gives sort of a dizzy feeling in a way. It's there's a way in which you get carried away with that, and it's all so uncertain, and because you can choose everything's possible, it's hard to know what to do at all. That's part of the anxiety in the modern age, I think, is precisely related to having so many options and no clear path. In centuries before and in other cultures, there was always a clear path. People knew who they were, where they fit, what they were supposed to do, and how you got there. And today, all of a sudden, that's all changed because you've got these differences. So your experience there of saying that, well, I felt the need to get into a clear path is very understandable, I think.
Right. I think that's the whole process of college, at least in my experience, was to find out what was going to work for me and who I was so that I could find out what I could do my best in. And again, at that time, that's what I was trying to do. I was trying to say, all right, who am I? First of all, what am I going to do with my life? Second of all, and third, how am I going to make it work right now? What's going to be, best for right now?
Yes. So you had that other point that you just brought up there intrigues me also is the identity question, because I think that lies behind a lot of what is going on. That during these collegiate years, that's what you're doing, is sort of finding out who you are, working out your identity, almost trying on different roles in a way, and interacting in different ways, gradually finding your independence and so on. And that's a really valuable thing. And also, I noticed that when you were talking along the way that there was a evolving sense of such things. It isn't though during your freshman year you got this all solved and then you sailed through, but there's an ongoing process of finding one's own identity. In fact, I think you extend it beyond school, and you don't think, well, now just because you graduated, now all of that is clear. In other words, I like that phrase that we're always making ourselves to be what we will be forever. That through our choices, we're always forming our identity and almost making our essence through the decisions that we make. And in that sense, the collegiate experience seems to me to be very helpful. You're learning how to do that, getting practice in it, in an environment where the mistakes don't have tremendous consequences. I mean, if you had chose the wrong major for a year, I mean, sort of so what? I mean, you learn something about that field, and maybe it's going to take you another year to graduate, although that didn't happen to you, did it?
No.
But, you know, it's all right. So it's an atmosphere that I think is good for that, allowing people to make some mistakes and experiment a little. And oftentimes in a world career setting, it becomes more serious, especially choice of vocations and things like that.
And what I think is important too about that whole process is the fact that for me, what helped me work through that was advisors. And even I went through a number of advisors before I found somebody that would really sit down and work with me. But when I did, it was then that I could really work on this process and figure out, okay, what classes can I take? What am I interested in? What do I want to do? What do I see myself doing? Advisor
system's important, isn't it?
Right.
And often doesn't work well. We all know that. And there's always a lot of talk about how you're going to improve it. But, boy, when you find a good one, you got a valuable person.
Right.
And you found that.
Yeah.
That's terrific. Well, I stopped your story somewhere along the line there. Let's pick that up again. Do you remember where you were?
I was in pre-med at the time. Well, after that was very short-lived. I went from international relations in the middle of the year to pre-med. By the end of the year, I knew that I needed something else. During that time, I was trying to find advisors, and I did find an advisor through the university college, and I hooked up with him, and he helped me along the way, try to develop a program, talk to me about different opportunities of all the colleges and things like that, in which case then I became a student of the university college, and became enrolled in an interdisciplinary studies program.
Yeah, that really, the latitude in those programs has proven to be helpful to many people. My sister went through that same thing at the university, and it proved to be very helpful to her. And it was the idea of being interdisciplinary and having a lot of choices. She liked that a lot. And that proved to be your home then at the university, huh?
Right.
Yeah. Well, Mary, let's talk about another transition then that I think is really important, and one you've gone through recently in your own life. That is coming to the end of your senior year and having to deal with leaving school and entering the workforce and taking up your career and so on, going through graduation. Do you want to say something about some of the feelings that are connected with all of that and how you perceived it?
I think one of the biggest feelings I had about graduating, one, of course, I was excited, but even more than that was knowing how I was going to fit in after college, in the sense that, one, leaving the college environment, I'm exposed to a lot less people my age, and I'll be exposed to a smaller realm of people interested in the same things that I am. And I was really curious about how am I going to fit my spirituality and my education and my interests into the world, where at college my spirituality was integrated with a lot of my friends, my involvement on campus, and so were my studies as well as my other activities. Mm-hmm. And it really became integrated almost to, for every student it's different, but you can perfect it for yourself. And now I question, how am I going to carry that through? Is taking a job in the business world what I really want to do? Am I going to really be able to live my faith that way? Or, what do I have to do that?
That's a telling statement. I noted the idea that you had there about how you have a shrinking pool of people with shared values. I mean, that's right, because you were so involved in the campus parish, university parish, and in the Newman Club, that you automatically were associating with people who had certain similar values with yourself. And, the worship experience brought you together that way. Many of your friends were the same religious background, right, shared your Catholic faith, and so on. And what you, in a sense, I guess what you are doing is moving into a more pluralistic situation with more options and more variety. And another question that you were wrestling with there, that idea of integrating, how are you going to integrate your faith, your spirituality with your career, is an ongoing question. I mean, anyone who takes their religion seriously has to try to figure that out. And there are great pressures along that line, as people who've gone through it can tell you. And so I guess that is a new testing, isn't it? A new, I don't know that I ever looked at it quite in that way before, but I can see what you're saying. How have you tried to prepare yourself for that?
Well, I've had a lot of discussion with some of my other friends who are graduating, who are facing the same kind of thing. But most of all, I try to look inside. I keep bringing it back to myself, because I have to know, only I can know what makes my equilibrium. And if I'm looking at a job that I know that I'm going to feel pressured in and not going to be able to pay attention to my interest in social concerns or my interest in my faith and things like that, then I have to really look inside and decide for myself, is this what's going to be best for me? And I guess I never really had to do that. I never really had to look in and say, well, wait a minute, this might not work. This might rub wrong against me.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I like your phrase, the equilibrium. You knew only from the inside about your own equilibrium. Mm-hmm. I think that's true. Maybe a lot of us have never even learned to do that, to trust our own experience along that line, or to recognize the symptoms within our own self about the question of equilibrium, keeping balance, and integration, keeping things together. And, I'm glad that you're working on all of that. I suppose there are certain negative feelings about leaving, huh? I mean, in terms of leaving friends and so on. Is that a talking point with some of the people?
Oh, sure. I think that the goodbyes are harder than what I thought they would be, in the sense that I feel like I'm leaving a really safe, close group of people, and I don't know where they're going to be in even a year from now, let alone I don't know where I'm going to be. And so to know that I've had all these people in my life for, the last 4 years maximum, to know that I'm leaving and they may have just been a part of my life at this time is a hard thing to realize.
Yes, it is. And I think it is one of the great sadnesses of life that time and distance, geography, do have an effect on relationships. I mean,
right.
I guess one of the beautiful things of life is when geography cannot cut into our relationships. I mean, there's certain friendships that I can think that I made over the years that just have continued no matter what. And that is a real blessing from God, it has always seemed to me, one of the great joys of life, to be able to maintain that interaction or to pick up a relationship after a long period of time or a lot of separation. But on the other hand, there's a lot of relationships that just don't stand that distance and time. They simply aren't there anymore. And I think that a good way to think about those is that they were a blessing for the moment, and we carry some of that memory with us. And even though we don't see the person anymore or interact with them, still bits and pieces of them, I think, are carried in our heart or form part of our personality. And maybe those memories are what we hang on to a little bit as we go along with that. But you'll get your experience of that over time and to see how that all sorts out. Any other sort of negative feelings about the leaving?
Negative, I guess, in the sense that it's hard to know. I mean, I still consider myself young, and so it's hard to know that when I look to years...
You seem pretty young to me, too, Mary. I'll go along with that.
It's hard to know that now, I mean, people expect me to be old. I mean, at least more of an adult. Yes. And it sounds kind of crazy, but it's hard to really envision that because I've always been a student, and a student is always somebody who hasn't reached the real world yet.
Yeah. And then now you're out here in the real world, and you have to function in that. And there's certain expectations. I think that's right. And that one has to try to adjust to that. Knowing your track record of dealing well with transitions, I think you'll do just fine with all of that. Well, Mary, we've been talking here all about the collegiate experience in transitions, and you've had some good ones. And from my point of view, you've handled them extremely well. Moved from the high school setting into the collegiate thing, used your head and got involved and made the university parish part of your home, functioned very diligently in our Newman Club, and then found your way through the university structure and different majors and so on, and now you find yourself graduating and moving out into the world. I feel very confident about people like you. I think you got some great insights, and I guess I'm happy as a campus minister to be somehow part of that, and to feel that, well, maybe some of the training that went on here will help you in the days ahead.
You've been listening to Reflections with theologian Father James Bacik, lecturer and campus minister at the University of Toledo. Today on Reflections, Father Bacik talked with Mary Reman, who is a recent graduate from the University of Toledo. The topic of this week's Reflections was the college experience, living through transition. If you have any comments on this week's show or suggestions for future programs, please write Father James Bacik, Catholic Campus Ministry, 2086 Brookdale Drive, Toledo, Ohio, 43606. Funding for this program was provided by the Catholic Communications Commission of the Diocese of Toledo.